So hello and welcome to this event, the next in our series of Principal Designate events in partnership with the Department for Education. My name is Tom Orr, I'm the Deputy Head of School Programmes at New Schools Network. So today's session is going to be about building an effective team, and we're very pleased to be joined by Yvonne Ridley from the Teaching Workforce Directorate. Yvonne is going to be speaking for the first 10 to 15 minutes on the Teaching Vacancy service and on how to make best use of this support. So welcome to Yvonne. We're also very pleased to be joined by our very own NSN specialist, George Bulman. George was the founding principal of New Islington Free School, a two-form entry primary school in Manchester, and is currently the CEO of Samara Trust, a small mat based in Cheshire. Just a couple of bits of housekeeping for the session before we kick off. Today's session is being recorded. Please could we have mics off while our speakers are talking, but cameras on, so it's good to see your faces as we go along. Just a final note from me that I will be heading off just before 11 for a previous appointment, but my colleague Haj, who's also on the call here today, will be taking questions at the end and giving back. So for anything that you need, please just drop a message. And without further ado, I will pass over to Yvonne to get us kicked off.
Okay, just give me a minute while I load up my screen. It worked before on the test, so fingers crossed. Hopefully everybody can see that. Right, hello everybody. Can you all hear me okay? Just wave if you can. Yeah, good. Right. Okay. That's a good sound because I usually forget to turn my microphone on. So I'm Yvonne Ridley. I'm the marketing and communications lead for Teaching Vacancies. And I thought today I would give you a quick update on what the service is all about. But I thought it'd be helpful just to kind of set the scene of where I sit in within the DFE, because I know it's a huge beast and there's lots of different areas. So I sit in the Teaching Workforce Directorate, and our aim is to help schools recruit excellent teachers and to support teachers through the journey. Within the Teaching Workforce Directorate, we have what we call teacher services, and these are the different digital services that support teachers from, or students actually, from the moment they're starting to think about, I'd like to be a teacher. So we're looking at GCSE and A-level students, to applying, that process of applying, so going through ITT providers. And as many as you may know, that's been brought in-house now, and that's a kind of a new service that we're able to leverage. Teaching Vacancies sits under the Start Teaching banner, and that also sits alongside kind of QTS. So when teachers get their QTS or any induction programs, and that follows through to kind of MPQs, so part of the CPD, right through to when they decide to hang up the clogs and retire and kind of collect their pension. And the reason I'm sharing this with you is because I just wanted to demonstrate that we're teaching vacancies as part of an ecosystem. So we're not kind of a little island working by ourselves. We kind of fit in to a whole kind of collection of services that will help schools recruit and teachers find jobs. And I think that the point I want to make here is, as those services mature, they're going to start coming together. The data is going to integrate, the databases are going to integrate, and we're going to be able to leverage a lot more from having those services working together. And we've seen already, by bringing in the apply service in-house, that is giving me a new database of student teachers that I can talk to, which is absolutely brilliant, but I can talk about that in a bit further down. I just want to share this video that Richard Gill recorded for us last term, which I think kind of sums up what Teaching Vacancies is, but shows the endorsement that we've got at the highest level.
Hello, my name is Richard Gill. I'm Chair of the Teaching Schools Council and I'm also CEO of the Arthur Terry Learning Partnership, a learning family of 11 primary schools and 5 secondary schools based in the West Midlands. I'd like to share with you some information around the Department for Education's Teaching Vacancies service. I'm not sure that everyone is aware of the cost-saving benefits of using this particular service, and I hope that through this video, the information I share will save you both time and money in the future. Teaching Vacancies is the Department for Education's free national service for advertising teaching roles. We're all aware of the costs associated with traditional recruitment, but this service is free. You might be interested to know that in May alone this year, over 250,000, 250,000 job-seeking teachers visited the Teaching Vacancies website. The reach is vast and growing. By using Teaching Vacancies instead of paying for the traditional recruitment advertising, you will save both time and money. What's more, all state maintained primary and secondary schools in England are eligible, and currently nearly 4 in 5, around 80% of schools are signed up to use this service. The idea for Teaching Vacancies came from school leaders and school business managers like you, the sector voice. The ask was for something that was free and effective. And now it's available, I think we need to make the most of it. So please, join the thousands of teachers using Teaching Vacancies today, either to find the best jobs if you're a teacher, or to recruit the best candidates if you're an employer.
Thank you, Richard. So that was a nice endorsement for us. So just to kind of recap on what Richard said, Teaching Vacancies was launched about 3 years ago. It started out as a job listing board requested by head teachers, people like yourselves, who wanted to solve the cost of recruitment advertising. And that figure was estimated between 50 and 75 million. I think that's probably come down a little bit, but I still think it's around the 50 million mark. The service is open to schools, trusts, local authorities in England, and that's state maintained schools, not private schools, and they can list teaching, leadership, and just recently we've added education support roles to the service. So when we started out about 3 years ago, I think it's fair to say it was quite a clunky service. You know, you start off and you have to build a kind of a basic product. And we had that kind of chicken and egg situation. You know, how do you get schools signed up when you've got no teachers? How do you get teachers visiting the service when you haven't got schools listing on the service? But we've come a long way, and some of the features that we've built out on the service, I just thought I'd share a couple of them with you. I thought one that might be of interest to this audience as a team of people setting up new schools is we've recently added an ATS, an application tracking system. So on that tracking system, you can take application forms in, you can decide whether you want to interview them, accept them, reject them, send out kind of some pre-agreed emails and kind of just follow them all the way through. And what that does, if you haven't got the money to buy a big fancy application tracking system, it's a really easy to use process and system. What it also means is we've just introduced in September the new application form, and what we've heard from job seekers is they want a standardized application form, and I'm sure you've all heard this yourself. Job seekers get fed up having to fill in the same information over and over again, and the application form on Teaching Vacancies means they can put their standard information in, the names, addresses, CPD, etc., onto a form, and that kind of core information is saved. And what it means is each time they apply for a job, they've got more time to focus on writing the personal statement or the covering letter, something that really makes them stand out, and it makes it easier for hiring staff to see the sort of person that is applying for the role. And we know that saves job seekers about an hour each time on an application form. The other thing that we introduced, MATs and local authorities wanted a bird's eye view. So instead of having to go in and look at each school advertising individually, we've brought in a centralised system. So a MAT or a local authority can see all schools under their remit, see who's advertising, who's filling positions, etc. And then just going back to the job seeker, there's obviously a job alert system there for them to find the kind of sign up, register and find the next role. And then just talking briefly about some of the kind of the stats and where we are in the market. And given that we haven't quite reached our 3-year anniversary yet, that comes next month. We are now the largest source of primary schools listed directly by schools in England, which I think is an amazing achievement given the time that we've been going. We're the second largest. I won't give you any prizes for guessing who's the biggest, but we are on the kind of tails. We are fast growing with the secondary job seeking market. We've got 82% of schools signed up. So out of 22,000 schools eligible, that's about 18,000. And here's a couple of big numbers. Since September, the jobs listed on the service have been viewed 3 million times. That doesn't mean to say we've had 3 million people on the service. It just means people have been going onto the service and looking at the listings and viewing them. But what I can say in terms of the people visiting the service, last month, it was 255,000. So in February, 255,000 people, and in January it was 250 job seekers. So that is becoming our norm. During the busy months, we're getting around 250,000 people visiting our service looking at jobs. And one of the things that we've been doing in terms of our marketing, as well as when people land on the site, is encouraging them to sign up for job alerts, because we know not everybody's ready to move, and we know it kind of takes a build up to kind of thinking, when I'm thinking about moving a job, I want to move to a new job, I'm going to apply for a new job. So what we've been trying to do is build up this bank of people. And since January, we've sent out about 750,000 matches. So we've kind of sent out alerts for 750,000 jobs, which I think is pretty good. So what I can't give you at this point in time, and I think, you know, we're kind of on the cusp of being able to do this, is, you know, people wanting to know who's hiring through Teaching Vacancies, how many views are my jobs getting, etc., etc. And the reason we can't give that to you is, you know, in the last 18 months, the recruitment marketplace has been up and down because of COVID. You know, we're seeing the trends. We're seeing more schools advertising on our service. We're seeing more jobs posted. We're seeing less reliant on kind of paid for job boards. So at one point, I think there was about 10% of people recruiting exclusively through paid job boards. That's gone down to 4%. So all the trends are really, really good. What I can't share is any kind of hard data. I would hope that by the end of this recruitment cycle, we might be able to give you something more that demonstrates that journey we're on. But what we are picking up through our research, and we're constantly researching the service, is the how quick and easy the service is to use. So, you know, people are saying to us, it's great that we don't get any sales calls, which happens a lot in schools. We don't have to raise invoices. There's no procurement, because schools can just sign up, list their job. If they want to take the job down, they can do that. If they want to tweak it, they can do that. And all the time that they're listing on the service, we're seeing kind of good stories about money being saved, and, you know, increasingly the quality of the candidates coming through and the number of candidates coming through. We're also hearing from teachers who find the job sign-up process really easy. I think one of the things they like is there's no login. They can just go straight onto the service and look at the jobs there, and then they can choose if they want to sign up for job alerts and things like that. And I quite like the quote at the end about, it's great that there's finally a free government portal helping schools save money, because that's what we're all about. And I suspect that was probably an experienced teacher saying that, because we do know that kind of students and early career teachers don't really understand the cost to schools of recruitment advertising. And then just talking through about our marketing. So obviously being on the Gov.uk platform, it's one of the biggest platforms that you can be on. It's one of the most trusted platforms. So when you look online, you'll see that organically our listings appear very high, but we do support this with some kind of paid for and paid for marketing and some stakeholder engagement. And we split our audiences down into kind of a number of groups. We've obviously got the trainees and the early career teachers. So as they're coming out from their training and they're moving into looking for the first job, we kind of target them with kind of job alerts and, you know, kind of awareness of teaching vacancies. You've got the passive job seekers who, as I said before, aren't quite ready, but are thinking about moving jobs. And what we do, we target them on social media, encouraging them to sign up for job alerts. You've then got the people who are actually on the cusp of looking for a job, and they're the active job seekers. And we use something called PPC, pay per click. So that's when you might type in teaching jobs and you'll see the teaching vacancies website come up high on the listing. And then obviously, one of our really important audiences are hiring teams and HR teams, because they're the ones who are listing the jobs. So they're our audiences, and the sort of things that we do is, say, for example, with the ITT marketing, and I mentioned this before, we will have that database of trainee teachers and we will be able to start marketing them. And we're going to do some testing this academic year, but it'll really kick off in September, where we can kind of give them a series of emails talking about teaching vacancies, how it can save schools money, and more importantly, why they should be using it as opposed to going to supply agencies, who I know kind of charge schools huge amounts in terms of retainers, or paid for job boards. We also go through stakeholder and partnerships to extend our reach. So we work with NGA, National Association of Head Teachers, but there's lots of resources online that teachers use that we kind of tap into. So at the moment, I'm working on a partnership with Teacher Tap, who runs surveys with about 7,000 teachers. So it's another way of getting our message out. I think, though, what's kind of quite unique for DFE is we've got channels that nobody else can access. So we've got bulletins that go out to ITT providers. We've got a bulletin that goes out to new teachers. When teachers qualify and get their QTS status confirmed, our messages are on that email, on induction emails. Anywhere there's a teacher connection where it's appropriate to have our messaging, we're tapping into, and nobody in the commercial sector can do that. We're also supported by our regional delivery directorates. So there's 8 of those, and they'll be working with us to kind of tap in and get closer to local authorities, the bigger mats, and making sure that the whole engine is working together. You know, the overall aim of our marketing is to kind of get that national reach that will help you support the local advertising on the ground. I don't see the two being exclusive. I think, you know, there's a lot of good local job boards, free ones, or low cost, like the local authorities. I think what we can bring to the party is providing that national umbrella at no cost. So this is my ask for everybody on the line is help us break the link. We want to reduce the reliance on kind of paid for recruitment advertising. And the challenge that we've got at the moment is all the time jobs are listed on expensive paid for job boards. Teachers are going to be going to look there. If we can kind of create a single place for job listings, it's going to make it easier for teachers to find jobs, but also it's going to save you money. By getting schools and trusts and local authorities to list all their jobs on teaching vacancies. It helps with our organic search listings, but it also helps us kind of promote across social media and other channels. Again, if you could host a link on your school website to teaching vacancies, that is going to help raise that awareness kind of across the school community, which is what we're really keen to do. And if you use the new fully compliant safeguarding application form, that reduces the burden of producing your own form, but also means that you can use the advertising tracking system. And it also means that we can then start to see that kind of flow of people looking on the service to applying for the service. And I'll finish with this last video. It's very short.
Millions of pounds are spent by schools up and down the country on teacher recruitment advertising. Money that could go back into the classroom, into teaching and training, sports facilities, technology, and music lessons. Teaching Vacancies gives you access to thousands of qualified teachers across the whole country. It's free to advertise on the service, so whether you're a primary school, secondary school or trust, you'll find the right candidate on Teaching Vacancies. Teaching Vacancies directly integrates with Google Job Search, which means that your listing will be seen by a much bigger pool of job seekers. The service is also promoted across social media platforms, DfE's own social channels, and by key voices in the education sector.
We've been using Teaching Vacancies since March. March was my first application, and we appointed a really great assistant head teacher on the back of that. We had a field of 12 applicants. That's never before happened at our school.
So we're really big advocates of the Teacher Vacancies service, and we're planning for it to be our first port of call for all recruitment in the future of teaching and non-teaching staff. We think that this free offer is a really great opportunity for the entire education sector.
Start saving money on recruitment advertising. Start using Teaching Vacancies and join the thousands of schools who already put money back where it matters most, in the classroom.
There we are. Nearly played the video again for you. Such a good video. So that's Teaching Vacancies for you. I hope you found that useful and you kind of will start using the service. And if there's anything I can do to help you use the service, just get in touch. And I'm happy to take questions.
Very much, Yvonne. I think just for time, I think we might move into George's presentation, but if we can take any questions and perhaps forward them on to you after the event.
So that's your nice way of saying I overran, is it?
Of course not. We're very welcoming here.
Okay, well, really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you then. Bye-bye.
Thanks very much, Yvonne. Take care. Brilliant, George. I will ask you to kick off your presentation.
Okay, thanks, Tom. And just before, I was just going to say thanks to Yvonne, but I think she's just gone. Yeah, that was very useful. I've been jotting some notes down as well, and I'll remind the head teachers I work with as well to use that service as well. Okay, well, good morning, everybody. I've got to do the whole Teams thing of sharing my screen in a moment, so bear with me. But just before I endure that trial, just thank you for joining this session. I know from my time in pre-opening just how exceptionally busy you will all be. So thank you very much indeed for taking the time to join us this morning. Right, let me see if I can share my screen. Okay, is that working, Tom? Yep, great. And can you still hear me as well?
Yeah, good.
Okay, great. Thanks very much indeed. Okay, right. Well, thank you very much indeed, everybody, for joining the session. As Tom mentioned, my name's George Bulman. I've been working with New Schools Network since 2018. And during that time, I've worked with perhaps 30 or 40 different principals and trusts in all kinds of different free schools, AP, special, primary and secondary. As Tom said, my own background, my free school background, is as a Wave 3 opener back in 2013 in Manchester. We had 85 pupils on our first day, opening with reception year 1, year 2 and year 3. After a year, we had 140 children. After 3 years, or the start of our third year, we had 240 children. So as you can imagine, and then it built to 300 plus after that. So as you can imagine, we did lots and lots of staff recruitment, but also particularly staff development. So today, I'm going to try and give you some of the pointers of the things that you might want to consider. I'm going to try and pass on some of the lessons I learned along the way. And if I'm feeling particularly brave, I might share some of the mistakes that I made so that you can try and avoid those particular pitfalls. So firstly, a quick overview of our session. So these are the areas that I'd like to look at with you today, and apologies in advance, there's lots and lots of talking, so hopefully it's being recorded, so you can perhaps look at it afterwards, have a look at the slides which will be sent out, I believe, and spool through to the bits that you perhaps missed or might find most relevant. So we'll look at the characteristics of effective teams very briefly. We'll look at how you might establish your founding team, what resources you might use to do that, critically how you can instill the vision in your team and how you have to keep looking back at that and revisiting it, and then thinking ahead to your next steps. So I suppose the first thing I would mention just before we start is that every school will have its own bespoke structure which you will create. You'll have an idea of that now, but you'll refine it as you go along. And today I'm only really speaking from my own experience and my studies, and I'll try and generalize where I can, but I do understand that everybody's situation will be unique. So I suppose at the very least, I hope there'll be something of use for you that you can take away from the session today. So when I was thinking about putting this presentation together, I did what we all do and tapped it into Google just to see out of interest what would come up. And any Google search, if you put in characteristics of effective teams, you will be inundated with lists of maybe 5, as the internet loves lists. There'll be 5 things or 7 things or the 10 characteristics, or here the 14 characteristics of effective teams. That's one of them that I found online, but as I say, there are dozens. I think you could probably all put together that list yourself if you had 5 minutes and a post-it note. And I think critically, we all know what it feels like perhaps to be part of a great team, and also perhaps not be part of one that isn't quite so good as well sometimes. But I remember back to my time 10 years ago, as a free school principal designate, you've got a fairly unique opportunity and a challenge to grow the best team ever, really, that your idea of what would constitute the team that you would like to be in and that you would like to lead. People often talk about the building or lots of other aspects of starting a free school, but for me, actually, one of the most exciting things was having that opportunity, almost a blank sheet of paper, put together your best team, and also the challenge and the kind of problem-solving approach of how you're going to grow that team and keep it being effective, which we'll touch on later in this presentation. So you've got to grow your group into an effective little unit which will fulfill all the requirements of a high-performing school, as well as tracking back to your original vision that was expressed way back when your proposer group applied for the school, back in the application stage. I think as a startup organisation, which is so centred on people and community, and lots of already very hard to manage aspects, and has so much resting on it in terms of aspiration and expectation, free school, I think, is a particularly good example of somewhere that requires its founding team to work well and also work well together quickly. And as I say, when I think back to my own experience, there were lots of challenges and very, very enjoyable aspects of the free school journey. But as I say, assembling the team was definitely a real highlight. So in essence, you've just got to do 2 things. You've just got to pick your team, and then you've got to develop them. So some of you, I know, will already be very familiar with the Belbin model. Work that particular study looks famously at types of team members and the different contributions that they make to supporting the work of the team as a whole. If you're not familiar with it, there's a link there which will just give you a 5-minute glimpse of the concept. But it's all about having different styles of people who are particularly good at looking at detail, people who are particularly good at completing and finishing tasks, people that have great ideas but aren't always fantastic at actually implementing them. And if you have a mixture of those people on your team, it can add a great deal of strength. Having said that, a school team is subtly different really to a team that might come together where people are doing different tasks, come together to do one particular project and then dissipate at the end. In a school, you can sometimes think of that as what might be called a proximity team. So you've got lots of strong individuals working alongside each other, still collaborating, because that's what you definitely want. You want people to work together, but not always operating in the sense of being a true component of a larger whole, you know, like a football team with all of the different player roles. But you need to think about how you're going to lead that group of strong individuals, and how you're going to support them in that function. So we've just had a really good input from Yvonne, and as I say, I'll be taking that back to work with me this afternoon. You need to think about who those initial members of your team might be. So thinking back to my own experience, experienced teachers are more expensive, but they will get your school off to a great start and require less support from you whilst you are incredibly busy. I don't think I've ever been busier at work than those first few terms starting the free school. So experienced teachers are going to be experienced in liaising with parents. They'll be able to deal with challenging behaviour, organise events, which will be really important for the start of your school. Things like your first harvest, your first Christmas production, they're incredibly important touch points for your new school community. So it's really important to get those right. They'll be able to have more experience in adapting the curriculum to working with all the various additional needs that you might have and that you're not aware of as well, because there's no precedent for the school. Employing more experienced teachers might involve some pump priming, so you need to be prepared to factor that into your early budget planning. Equally, early stages teachers, I'm thinking sort of M2, 3 and 4, can be absolutely fantastic as well. They've got the essential skills, hopefully. They're keen to develop, keen to contribute, but they're still open to guidance and direction. Quick mention of employing ECTs in the first or second year of opening. I suppose the only thing I would say about that is it needs very careful consideration, and very much comes down to the individual. Personally, I only felt able to recruit them from the third or fourth year of opening. You've got to consider, will you have the capacity in your school to support them and provide for their 2-year induction? Doing it yourself may seem possible at this stage, but it's really a lot of work to do it properly, and also from their perspective to ensure that they receive a fair deal as well. You've got to consider their additional release time as well, and how you will cover that, what can be a very challenging time for the school. Having said all of that, I've seen it work really well. I've also seen it work not so well, and take the head teacher away from their central role in the first year of opening in particular. I would say appointing TAs is absolutely critical, and I tried to do that at the same time as appointing the teaching staff, so that when I was putting the team together, there was a great sense of equality and that everybody had something to contribute on an equal basis. TAs, as I say, just from my experience, I found that past school experience wasn't always critical. Particularly in the early stages, you need to think about the broader skills that you're going to need. Just an example, one of the best teaching assistants I think I've ever recruited had never worked in a school but had a children's home background, and it was easy. She'd soaked up school provided training on classroom skills and intervention programs and such like, and just had a wealth of pastoral experience, which was of immense benefit. So don't exclude people that haven't necessarily worked in a school before. They might just be exactly what you need. Getting back just briefly to more experienced teachers, they can bring a huge amount of benefits. But when interviewing them and watching them teach, I think trying to get a sense of whether they're the kind of person who wants to learn and try new things and perhaps adapt and change their teaching methods, particularly if you've got a particular programmatic style in mind. Will they adapt to that? Will they be willing to do that? Or have they perhaps become embedded in one particular approach for their teaching, and consider whether that will benefit your vision for your school as it develops, or whether they might actually slip back into ways that they've always found useful, and whether that will actually generate and instill that in others in the team as well. Okay, just some basics there just before we move on to building your own team. Induction, absolutely critical in terms of all the dull stuff of procedures and policies, but absolutely critical to get that right before the school opening. Thinking things like getting safeguarding in place, supervision procedures indoors and in the playground, first aid procedures, because in September you'll be straight into operating as a functioning school. And it's really important that before that time, everybody's absolutely au fait with all the different aspects of the school in terms of how it will run on a day-to-day basis. You need to plan all of that. You need to document any training that you've put in place, particularly safeguarding, supervision procedures, code of conduct. You need to document whether you do it in an electronic form or just in a piece of paper or on a spreadsheet. You need to document that staff have received, read and understood all of that information. Hopefully you won't have need to have recourse to that, but it's really, really important to have that all in place. It's a good idea if you can to produce an induction pack with all of the basics, and as I say, get signed receipt of that. There are electronic ways of doing that, or you can just get people's signatures, but make sure you store it all very safely. If possible, ensure that you have at least 2 level 3 trained designated people for safeguarding on day 1 of opening. That might just be yourself, and it might be somebody else that you perhaps access from wider across your trust. If you can have 2 people on site, that's absolutely fantastic. Even if there's just 1 class in your school, it's a tremendous help when issues arise, to be able to discuss with that situation with somebody who understands the situation and understands the children and families involved, perhaps. Obvious to say, but make sure that your recruitment panel includes at least 1 person that's trained in safer recruitment. And just as an aside, really, give equal time to all role recruitment. In those early days, it's really, really important to consider all of the people in your school and the contribution that they will make. Supporting your team leaders in the early days, that might actually be quite small, but thinking about going forwards, they may well become your middle leaders. But actually, even teachers are themselves leading mini teams. They might have teaching assistants to manage. They might have students. They might have volunteers. They might have staff that are coming in from elsewhere in your trust, and they might be doing that for the first time. So don't forget that they might need your support in doing that. Nursery or reception teacher, that appointment is absolutely critical. Think about their capacity to perhaps become your EYFS lead in the future. And similarly, in secondary settings, the teacher that is going to liaise with feeder schools for year 7 admission, that is a really critical appointment as well. Both of them will be vital in establishing your day-to-day working relationships with families, and that in turn is absolutely crucial for your marketing. Equally, your admin staff and your site manager need to be completely on message, really engaging with people that they meet, really friendly and approachable, even when under a bit of pressure as well. Site manager on the gate, as well as yourselves in the morning, all of these people are part of the public face of the school, and it's really important to make sure that you've made some really good choices there, and make sure that they can present your school in the way that you would yourself. Okay, a little bit of theory. I promise not to dwell on this too much, and I know a lot of you will be familiar with Tuckman's work. So the four-stage model that I've put just briefly here, as I say, I won't dwell on it, but it's very well known. The forming, storming, norming, performing model, and people have refined it over the years. It's been around for absolutely ever. Provides a framework for team development. And as you probably already know, I would imagine, it's proposed that a team, from the moment that it's start to be put together, needs to go through all of these four stages before it can arrive at a point where the team is delivering really good outcomes. And as one of the first things I said was, as the leader of that team, you need to make sure that all of the stages are completed and fulfilled, but you need to do it at the fastest pace possible, because your school needs to be up and running and firing on all cylinders from September onwards. So you need to think about where the team is in pre-opening and in your first few terms, where the team is and where the individual staff are along that journey, and critically how you act at each stage. So this table mentions a fifth developmental stage, which is quite apt, I think, for teams which steadily grow, like in a free school, as year groups are added. Because there are lots of versions in this of descriptions online, but it's well worth revisiting it and thinking as a leader what you're going to be doing at each stage. So teams progress through this at different paces, but they need to be led through them, otherwise they can just drift off, and a lack of leadership can be quite problematic at points. So essentially you need to get to the performing stage as soon as possible. Things that can speed that up: relationship building, a strong focus on task and deadlines, and pressure, ironically, can actually speed things up because it really focuses everybody on the task in hand. Getting stuck on stages often happens. It can be the result of ineffective leadership or poor culture within the organisation, lack of individual motivation, and team members who don't complement each other. So that table picks up some of the things that as leader you might be doing through time at each stage. So generally speaking, any kind of team growth needs a consultative leadership style. It's really important to identify the clear outcomes and objectives, but it's really important, particularly when people have joined a free school, wanting to contribute, that you do have some kind of consultative style, and that you have some kind of delegation and also non-intrusive monitoring, which is valid as well. Teams often spot things which is not true, or faux consultation. Having said all of that, at the beginning in particular, you're going to be in telling mode a lot, and that's what people will want. They will want some clear direction at the beginning. So think of your leadership style. We've all got a preferred default approach, but in that particular situation, what do you think is going to be needed? As the team develops, that will change. So as I said, start off, you're going to be in telling mode, lots of clear instruction, which will reassure and give direction. And then progressively, you can act in more coaching sense, and then in more consultative mode. And then finally, when the team's up and running, you can start delegating activity. Now, I can't stress this enough. It's very much not a linear process in a team where you're in the first year as your school grows, and then the second year and the third year. As you're continually adding people in, the team may actually regress when you add new people, and you will be doing that a lot at the start. hopefully it won't happen too much, but when people leave as well, the team can regress a little bit. And so you might need to revisit previous stages and normalize things a little bit and encourage and redirect and refocus as well, and adapt your input there. Very quick mention of the difference, I think, between, or my view on it, between building a team and team building. Team building activities, and by that I'm thinking that some of the things that we will all have been involved in, building towers and such like, and things that don't actually relate to the task in hand. It can be useful, and people do often enjoy them, although actually sometimes they can be counterproductive and just waste time. So for me, the best team building events are getting the team to work on live work-based issues or problems that have some meaning, and that you're happy to let them have input into at the beginning. One example I used at the very beginning was the procurement of resources. So we all met, the team of 10 people that I'd assembled. We met during pre-opening, just for lunch, all got a YPO catalogue each, and basically just worked out what you needed to order, for the entire contents of their classrooms. And that simple little task really helped to develop ownership and access new ideas. Everybody felt that they could contribute something to that, and it was a genuine task which had use. It wasn't a meaningless one, which didn't have any link to the workplace. Something you need to be mindful of, I think, as the leader, that social element to the team can be really, really good. Meetups for coffees and things like that, but just be mindful that you keep awareness of that as the leader, because what you really don't want to happen is smaller sub-team cliques developing at an early stage. And it goes without saying that any whiff of favoritism from the team leader can absolutely kill the morale of the team. So just be mindful that everybody's receiving attention from you in equal measure, which can be very, very hard when you're so busy. So we just had some input about teaching vacancies on this. So now think about finding your team and creating it. Again, you need to allocate masses of time to recruitment because you're starting from scratch. So finding the right kind of staff is going to be vital to the success of your school. The initial candidates will shape the school, they'll answer questions, they'll pass on the message to new staff about your vision when you're not there. So you need to make sure that they're going to be fully paid up, fully on message members of your team. You need to involve a lot of your own personal time in the recruitment process, everything from writing the advert, making sure that you've got a really effective why work with us section of your website, right through to the induction of your new colleagues. You're going to have to travel a lot, I suspect, to see them teach a class, because you might not have access to a functioning school, and it'll be really hard to create opportunities perhaps in other trust schools to see them teach. But it's absolutely vital to see the relationship that they can build, and if they're teaching a class at the moment, the relationship that they have built up with their pupils. I remember feeling under a huge amount of pressure to fill the posts by May with the resignation deadline. I suppose I would say just try and hold your nerve if you can. Don't try and rush to fill the posts, even if you're feeling desperate, as I was at one point. It's got to be the right person. As I say, they're going to be critical in implementing your vision and being the first point of contact, which you will have to give over to them with your pupils and particularly with families as well, which is vital for developing word of mouth marketing. So if you think of the touch points, as I mentioned, which families experience, the reading books and the homework that's sent home, the class assemblies and the shows, parents' evening, your new colleagues will be responsible for all of those in very large part. So it's critical that you choose them so that they can represent the school correctly. So thinking about it, how do you find the right kind of people? Well, during the recruitment process, you need to ensure that the staff, and you need to be really open and honest about it, that they will need to be resilient and flexible and have a problem-solving mindset, especially in the early days when you might not have the resources to hand, or you might even be in temporary accommodation, or at times, if we're honest, it might actually feel quite chaotic. I think you need to be really honest about how challenging it will be for them. Equally, you need to be reassuring that you're going to do your utmost to ensure that they're well supported and well provided for, but they need to know that there might be have to be some give and take from everyone to help get the school off the ground. So at interview, try to ask questions that are related to those characteristics, and ask them to talk about similar challenges that they've had. They obviously may not have ever worked in a startup free school before, but they will have faced challenges where, you know, they had to work on their own initiative and be flexible and be cooperative in that way. I think one mistake I had made, I should say, was not always maintaining an open mind and being flexible myself when recruiting. I think you need to try not to have the ideal person in mind, because new colleagues will bring their own experiences and their own skills and their own enthusiasm, and frankly, if they align with your vision and your school ethos and aims, then you can capitalize on that. They can lead aspects of the school development, and they can add things that you might not have thought of, but will still fit in with the vision for your school. Potentially, they've got capacity to add leadership as well, which will be really important for the school's development in the first few years, and obviously really important for the Ofsted process. They can take ownership of things that they've introduced and spread enthusiasm, which is really good for retention as well. So look for expertise areas which complement your own, and look also for potential future middle leaders who can develop their subject and critically who can articulate it really well. You need to explain and also mean it, that it will be a consultative process, and that you very much encourage people to give ideas and opinions, and that might feel a bit different to them to if they've been working in an existing well-established team, and if they join one of those, they might feel a little bit inhibited in offering their ideas. So it's important to be encouraging that you know all ideas are welcomed. As we heard a little bit from Yvonne, you've got to think about how you're going to market your school to candidates. Obviously, there's all the usual channels that you might use, but social media and the school website itself, you need to show how your school is going to be unique and exciting, as well as being a safe bet for them, because it's such a new and not established enterprise. They might have some concerns about that. It's a very crowded marketplace, and you're going to need the very best candidates. So consistent messaging is really important in all of the channels that you use. You need to communicate the benefits to staff of working in your school, you know, things like job satisfaction, obviously, but the opportunity to contribute something new, being part of a supportive team, which will appeal to the kind of staff that you will need, who are going to need to be self-starters, resilient and enthusiastic. As I mentioned, I look on quite a few school websites for free schools. It's important that you now start thinking about your vacancies section being more than just the advert. It needs to be a why work with us, and make sure that it's updated. Think about your news section, because candidates will always look at that. Does that look vibrant? Is it up to date? Does it talk about the curriculum? And in fact, talking about that, does your curriculum section look well organised and exciting and well supported and well resourced? All of these things will reassure candidates about applying for a job in a new setting. Your head's welcome section, that's really important as well. They will look at that undoubtedly. Does it mention the value of the staff that is placed on them, and you know, how they're supported and developed too. As I said, I've seen quite a few school websites in pre-opening which are still a bit bland and lack all of those things. You need to make it really, really distinctive and sell your vision, and make sure that it gives the impression that it's all well thought through, supportive, almost an established feel if you can. Depending on the policy of your trust, you might be able to make use of TLR payments, TLR3 ones on a temporary basis, to get things started as the school grows, and then they might grow into a more permanent TLR place, or they might be able to change the project that they're working on, but that can be attractive and can give some flexibility as well. Supply agencies are often very keen, as you'll imagine, to provide try before you buy, as they sometimes call them, appointments. But and that can be hugely successful, very effective. I recruited 2 amazing teachers in that way in the first year. 2 things you need to be mindful of, I think, really, are that you need to make sure that you observe an interview before accepting, in exactly the same way as you would with any other member of staff. And also you need to be mindful that fees are likely to be charged to release supply staff later on, so be very aware of that as well. Okay, so now we've thought about where you're going to get your staff from and appointed them, you need to think about how you're going to instill the vision in this in your new team. So from the very outset, you need to communicate and reinforce your vision at every opportunity. It's really important, I think, to explain the essential elements of your vision at interview and get feedback from them at that stage on what they see that as looking like in practice and how they can contribute to delivering that. You need to make it really clear in all of the school literature, in everything that you publish online, and look out in applications for concurring evidence in their interview, in their practice when it's observed. So as I say, it's really important that the articulation of your vision or your key features or your USPs or KPIs or however you want to describe them are visible everywhere and at every stage. You can reinforce and explain those in explicit means, such as in-service training. You can incorporate them into the quality assurance procedures that you employ, such as lesson observations. If there are particular ways of teaching or ways of managing behaviour that you want to see, you can build those into your QA processes. You can give feedback on learning environments, create templates for that as well, so it's abundantly clear what the expectation is and how that fits into the vision and why you're doing it. That's critical really to every stage. Try and engender a why we're doing this, or we're doing this because, rather than just giving lists of things to do. And all of those can be discussed and circulated well in advance as well. The vision can feature in written documents like your brochures and your policies, guidelines, all of that kind of thing. And also don't underestimate the values of displays around your new school as well. We often aim those at children, but it's really important that they're seen and understood by families and staff. And it's a very useful way of you communicating what you think is going to be really important for your school. One example would be character values displays. If that's really important to your school development and delivery, you might want to reinforce aspects of how you learn as well as what you're learning. So things like Worker of the Week assemblies, that can be really useful if you can talk about the values of your school, but critically get other people to articulate it as well, and that will really embed your vision So you've got to understand that the year of opening team will build and own and understand and develop that vision themselves as well, and they become the experts. So from that point onwards, the new staff that join each year, as your school grows, you won't be able to have the same input when you've got 30 or 40 colleagues as when you've had 10 or 15. So they become the experts and pass on the message. So it's really important to instill that very thoroughly at the outset. So I suppose one thing I also wanted to mention was it's important to understand the development of the staff joining your school. In the first and second year, they will be the core staff who were involved right at the beginning, and went through all of the developmental stages. People who are joining, this will seem an age off, I know, but people that are joining in year 3 of opening, year 4 of opening, year 5 of opening, are seeing your school as much more of an extant, established, existing organisation. But going back to the Tuckman model, when they join, don't forget that your team will change and adapt at that point, and you need to go back to repeating all of the key inset messages every single year to reinforce them to existing members of staff, but also to introduce them to the new ones. A lot of free schools start off with some very structured programs, and that can be very, very useful, particularly, as I said, when you're in telling mode. But free staff that are drawn to the enterprise of a new free school will be very keen to contribute to the development. So that's really good, and you can channel and capitalize on it, but make sure that you maintain the direction and consistency, and adhere to the way that you want things to be done. I think one thing I did was, when things get incredibly busy, it can be quite tempting to let very competent, experienced teachers get on with things, but it's really, really important to make sure that what they're doing is what you really, really want them to do, and is consistent in completeness with all of your vision as well. Okay, so coming towards the end, in terms of future years, really, you will, of course, I would imagine at this stage, as I did, have a staffing structure growth in mind, but particularly in areas of the country where teacher availability can be quite limited, outside of the big conurbations, it's really important to try and maintain as much flexibility as you can, to try and account for unseen changes in pupil numbers and so on. For example, I employed contracted site staff, security staff that we needed, cleaners, caterers, all outsourced all of that for the first 3 years before thinking about moving some of those roles back in-house to permanent employment by the school. However you do it, and wherever the people are coming from, it's really, really important for you to build positive relationships with all colleagues and treat them all equitably. They will want to do their best, and you will need that, and you can facilitate that if they feel really valued and part of the overall endeavour. Contract cleaners as well will take great pride in what they're doing as well if they feel part of it. Meals, quality of the school building, cleanliness, all of those things, all really, really critical factors in the marketing of your school, and obviously important in their own right. Ensure any contracts that you issue are very flexible, and make sure that the staff understand that as well. So, for example, if you are employing any specialist teaching staff, they need to understand that they might have to be redeployed as a class teacher if needed, but of course your trust will take a lead on that as well. You need to be prepared to change your plan to suit the people that you have available as you recruit others. and also as you get to know their strengths. For example, was somebody I appointed, and I had a very particular role in mind for them. But as they started working in school, it became abundantly clear that they were actually much better suited to doing something else. So my recruitment strategy had to alter accordingly. So maintain flexibility yourself as well. And in a growing team, you have got the scope to do that, which is one of the joys of it. Similarly, I suppose a mistake I made was to have too rigid a structure in mind when I started off. I had in mind that I would have 3 specialist teachers, one for music, one for MFL, and one for computing. But I had to change that after a couple of years when I just couldn't find the right people, but I could find better quality candidates who could do other things which still fitted in with the vision of the school. So I had to change and refine the plan, which is probably better than to stick with your plan and appoint lower quality personnel. So as I mentioned earlier, don't make the mistake I did and try and have the ideal person in mind when you're recruiting. You need to think about the skills and the attitude, resilience, adaptability, and have that in mind as well when you're doing the recruiting. Sometimes you're presented with somebody who has potential for the medium and longer term. For example, I came across a fantastic teacher in about the 2nd year of opening, who would be ideal for year 6, which is obviously a very important appointment in a primary school. But at the time, of course, I didn't have a year 6 class, but they were really, really keen to join the school and had all of the characteristics that I was looking for. So they started off teaching a different year group in year 2, which was the vacancy I had. But then on the understanding that they would move up into Key Stage 2 when that came on stream. So think about what you will need in the next year or 2, and if you come across people like that, can you fit them into your team now, so that they can fulfill a role which doesn't yet exist in the future. Critical to look out for people who've got middle leadership capacity as well, because you might be able to develop them in the way that you want them to be for their school. A big appointment obviously is deputy head teacher. You may be fortunate enough in starting with that, but perhaps not. Think about what responsibilities they will take on immediately and how that will change and evolve, and where you see them being and what your school will need when it's larger, and whether they will be able to fulfill that as well, and the transition between them probably having quite a large teaching commitment through to having much lighter teaching commitments, but other roles that they will need to take on. Plan for the unexpected or the unknown if you can. I was fortunate enough to be able to appoint 4 class teachers from day 1 and 6 teaching assistants. It's very difficult to know who's going to come through the door in September as well. So I was able to appoint 6, 1 for each class, 1 to take on additional needs and intervention, and then an additional 1 because we had an idea that some children would come with additional needs as well, which is very often the case in a free school, and who could be quickly redeployed as required. Not at all unusual for that in free schools, so bear that in mind if you can have any extra capacity at all, unlike in a larger extant school where you're obviously running things on a much tighter basis. So as you continue to build the team, you need to consider further additions in relation to the ones you've got, in order to complement the skills and personalities of the people that you've already got in your team. So thinking there about curriculum, co-curriculum, art, experience of organising performances and such like. So think about what you will really need in the 2nd and 3rd and 4th year. And as you move into those, think about your increasing demands on SEND provision and PPA provision and how you're going to organise that. Try and think about flexibility within that as well. Can you buy that in on an external basis, like sports coaches, music teachers, maybe an MFL teacher? They can work really well in those early days when you don't have necessarily your own capacity for delivering PPA. Senko, just on that note, that may well be yourselves in the early days. So what experience have you had of that? Can you access any support from outside of your own school, from within the trust? What training might you need? Is it possible that you can develop somebody in the first couple of years? Can they do the NASEN course and then be appointed as Senko at a later date? Whoa. Drat. Knew that would happen. Okay, so I mucked up my last slide, so apologies for that. But just in summary then, so starting a free school is quite an extreme situation of newness and change. There's often no procedures, and you're making those up as you go along on the hoof. So staff need to be really independent, but equally not go off on a tangent. So when you're appointing, think of the team skills, which will be really important in developing a group of people who will work really well in a sometimes very chaotic and challenging situation. So don't forget on appointment, as well as being a great teacher, they need to be resilient, enthusiastic, not a prima donna, self-motivated, have initiative, and be realistic about what the school's going to be like as well. And it is going to be great, but it will be really challenging. And just a heads up, as the founding head, you can be expected to be asked a lot of questions. So, and it'll be hundreds, and you'll feel like you have to provide an answer immediately, you know, to be in, particularly when you're in that telling mode initially. But encourage people to check in, use their initiative, but always check in with you. But also, I think, try and develop a culture, if you can, where it's actually okay if you don't immediately know the answer, or if the answer sometimes changes, because things do happen. You'll give one answer and then something else will become apparent, and they might have to do something else. So they need to be flexible too. But if you've got the culture where that's acceptable by everybody, then that is a real help. So that's pretty much everything I had to say. I know there's some questions, I think, but thank you very much indeed for your time. I hope some of that is of a little bit of use to you, and good luck. It's a very, very exciting thing to do. I remember it with great fondness. I'm not going to say I envy you, but you will enjoy it.
Thank you so much, George. Yeah, that was absolutely fantastic. And if anyone had any questions, you know, Richard's popped in a question in the chat. Feel free to use the chat function, or if you wanted to unmute and ask yourself, whatever feels easier. So George, if it's okay to answer Richard's question, did you appoint support staff by a certain date?
Is that sorry, I'm just looking at the chat now. Is that Richard's question, did you appoint certain support staff by a certain date?
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah, my question was, George, hi there, thanks for that.
Hi there, hi.
Was that I was really intrigued by your procurement idea and getting the team to work together as a sort of team building activity. I know I know the heads on the line have probably had the same message as me. You need to order ASAP because there's a massive shortage of certain resources at the moment because of
Correct.
you know that are going on around the world.
Yeah,
and
so it must be even worse now. But I remember, I mean, I had this certain naivety, I suppose, because I'd been ahead for 10 years. So you know, if we needed some new stuff,
yeah,
you just like go it. But when you're ordering a whole school worth of tables, and they say, well, actually, it's a 3-month lead time. It's like, what?
Exactly. And then obviously you got the headache of where you're going to put it and all that sort of stuff. So when, it's interesting when you were appointing, because obviously I've got adverts at the moment for teachers and stuff. But when you do appoint your support staff, so you can get that, that team element is so important. I was really intrigued by when you said about, treat every member of the team with sort of equal weighting, because, as a head, I've been a head for a while, you do tend to spend more time with your teachers often, and that isn't always the right way. So any sort of thoughts on that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. That was one of the things that how to put it, it almost sounds patronizing, doesn't it, to say I thought about the teaching assistants and how I wanted to incorporate them, almost as if I'm sort of assuming a hierarchy. But leaving that aside, because there are teachers and teaching assistants by definition, and way back when I actually started my career as a teaching assistant in a special school, so I've always been very mindful of the impact that teaching assistants can have. So it sort of started off by chance, and then actually I was really pleased that I'd done it, but I actually appointed the teaching assistants first. So I appointed 6 teaching assistants, and they started because some of them had more flexibility. And again, as I say, right from the outset, everybody's situation is different. So you may not be able to do this. But I actually appointed the teaching assistants to start work in August, 2 weeks before the school was due to open, which for us was hugely helpful, because we were moving into temporary, and again, everyone will be doing different things, but we were moving into a temporary accommodation. So we actually rented a unit which was near to the temporary site, and I worked with the teaching assistants for that week leading up to opening, just getting everything ready, just in classroom boxes, labeled, this is going in your reception, this is year 1, this is year 2, this is year 3, all the pens and pencils and rulers and scissors and the laminator and the cutter and all of that kind of stuff. And that was a fantastic team building exercise in itself, because it was real, and it was focused, and it was something that they could do. And then they became the experts on all of that. We could have lots of discussion during that time about curriculum and how they would work and phonics and all of those kind of things, but in a really natural way. And I got to spend time with them, which was fantastic. And then when in our ridiculous situation, we had access to our building at 2 o'clock on Friday afternoon, opening on Monday morning. It's like, right now you can come in. So, but we were able to just pile in, and it was a really great time, actually. Really exciting. But they felt a massive part of it, and actually they were able to tell the teachers things as well, because some of them were there as well voluntarily, but others were away, and all kinds of things, really. So that was a huge advantage, actually, to employ the teaching assistants at the same time, and then they could hit the ground running, and that was a massive assistance to the teachers. So that was the way I did it.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Did anyone have any other questions for George? No?
No, as always, I think I've bombarded people with too much chat.
Well, if anyone, upon reflection, if anyone did have any questions, you are do feel free to email them at events@newschoolsnetwork.org. I'm sure George will be happy to answer any questions that you have. If you had any questions, thank you, George. If you had any questions for Yvonne as well, please do feel free to send them at the events@newschoolsnetwork.org email address as well. And just finally, thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for George as well. We do have a few bits and bobs. So if you're not already on the NSN Hub, which is our private social media network for principal designates and preschool head teachers, do feel free to join. We have an exclusive program which is for 2022 openers called the Opening of School program, and I've popped the link into the chat if you want to join. Tomorrow we'll be having a networking event for principal designates opening in 2022 from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. If you want to join, learn a bit about the cohorts, about each other, how you can support each other until you open, and of course whilst when you are open as well, do feel free to join that. And finally, thank you so much for joining. We're just going to pop a poll up just to ask for your feedback on how you found the session, so that should come up now. If you would like to answer that would be absolutely fantastic, just so that we know how you found it. Thank you so much. And yes, finally, just thank you all for coming. If you did have any questions, again, please do feel free to send them our way. And thank you so much. We hope you have a lovely rest of your day.
Thank you. Really useful.
Thank you.